The sun dipped low over the ruined skyline of what was once a bustling city, now nothing more than a skeleton of concrete and rusted steel. In the distance, faint war cries echoed across the barren wasteland. Dead America was no longer the land of opportunity, it was a battlefield, where every day was a struggle to survive between the relentless undead and desperate pockets of humanity. Here, survival meant everything. Trust meant nothing. At Ashfall Outpost, a small fortified settlement clinging to life in the shadow of crumbling skyscrapers, a tense silence filled the air. The outpost had been a safe haven for months, a rare refuge amid the chaos. Yet tonight, that fragile safety was about to be shattered. Commander Lena Ortiz stood atop the watchtower, her eyes scanning the horizon with sharp intensity. Her team, hardened survivors from every walk of life, were gathered below, preparing for what she feared would be a brutal siege. Her weathered face showed the toll of endless nights fighting off the undead hordes, but her spirit remained unbroken. "We don't have much time," Lena said, voice low but firm. "The dead are coming, and they're more organized than ever. This isn't just a random horde, we're dealing with something different now. They're hunting." A murmur ran through the group. Hunter zombies, smarter, faster, more dangerous. Survivors called them the prowlers. Unlike the slow-moving corpses that shuffled mindlessly, prowlers stalked their prey with eerie precision. Several outposts had fallen to their cunning tactics. Ashfall couldn't become another victim. Marcus, the outpost's weapons expert, loaded his rifle with calm efficiency. "We've got traps laid out on the eastern perimeter," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "If they hit those, we might hold them off long enough for reinforcements." "Reinforcements?" Lena's eyes narrowed. "From where?" "The last convoy never made it through Dead River Valley." "We're running out of options," Marcus admitted. "But Ashfall is all that stands between the wasteland and the safe zone to the north. We have to hold the line." The outpost had been a beacon of hope for many survivors, families, fighters, and those too weary to keep running. Inside the walls, children huddled in the makeshift shelters, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond the barricades. Among them was little Jamie, no older than 8, clutching a worn teddy bear with a torn ear. His mother, Sarah, watched nervously as Lena made her rounds, delivering words of encouragement to every soul. Outside, the wind howled like a ghostly warning, carrying the faint scent of decay. Then came the first sign, a low guttural growl that rolled over the wasteland like a sinister thunderclap. The undead had arrived. From the shadows of the broken buildings, figures began to emerge, their movements jerky but relentless. The outpost's alarms screamed, piercing the heavy air. Spotlights swung across the battleground, illuminating faces twisted with hunger and death. The prowlers led the pack, slender, terrifyingly fast, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Lena grabbed her rifle, heart pounding. "Positions. Don't let them breach the wall." Gunfire erupted, flashing like staccato lightning in the night. The outpost's defenders fired with deadly precision, taking down the first wave. But the undead kept coming, an endless tide crashing against human resolve. Amid the chaos, Lena spotted a figure slipping through the perimeter. One of the prowlers had broken through. It moved like a shadow, silent and deadly. She fired, but the prowler dodged with unnatural agility and vanished into the darkness. Inside the command center, radios crackled with frantic voices. "Ashfall, come in. We've got movement on the west wall." Lena's pulse quickened. "Hold steady. Don't give them an inch." The battle raged for hours, each moment a test of willpower and survival. Fighters fell, but the outpost held. The walls were scarred with claw marks and shattered concrete, but humanity's last refuge refused to fall. As dawn approached, the undead retreated slowly, melting back into the wasteland from which they came. Silence returned, heavy and thick with the weight of loss. Lena lowered her rifle, shoulders aching. She glanced around at the weary faces of her team, some grieving, others determined to keep fighting. This was just the beginning. War cries would echo again. Battles would rage on. But Ashfall Outpost stood defiant, a symbol that even in dead America, hope could survive. The morning sun cast weak, pale light over Ashfall Outpost, revealing the scars left from the night's fierce battle. The once pristine barricades were now shattered and bloodied, littered with debris and the lifeless forms of those who hadn't made it through the night. The survivors moved with heavy steps, fatigue weighing down their bones like a crushing fog. The outpost had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Commander Lena Ortiz stood silently near the eastern wall, eyes tracing the horizon where the undead had vanished. Yet, something gnawed at her, a growing unease. The prowler that had slipped past the defenses last night wasn't just a random fluke. It was a warning. These creatures were evolving, learning from their encounters with humans. They were adapting. Inside the command center, the atmosphere was tense. Marcus was hunched over a makeshift map spread across a battered table, marking positions where the undead had attacked and retreated. The lines connecting their movements revealed a disturbing pattern. The prowlers weren't just hunting, they were organizing. "We need to assume the worst," Marcus said grimly. This wasn't a simple attack. They're coordinating strikes, probing for weaknesses. Lena nodded. "We need scouts out there, eyes on the wasteland. If the prowlers are planning something bigger, we need to know before it hits us again." Sarah approached, her face tired but resolute. "What about the safe zone? The north?" Her voice barely masked the fear beneath. "If Ashfall falls, that place becomes our only hope." Lena looked at her, empathy softening her harsh gaze. "The safe zone is still several days away through hostile territory. We can't just run, we have to fight. For our families, for everyone counting on us here." Meanwhile, outside the walls, a small group of survivors prepared for the scouting mission. Among them was Caleb, a former military tracker with sharp instincts and a steady hand. His job was clear: find out what the prowlers were planning and if more undead forces were assembling. Caleb checked his gear carefully: a crossbow, a hunting knife, and a small radio linked back to Ashfall. His eyes met Lena's briefly before stepping into the wasteland, the cracked earth crunching underfoot. The wasteland was a vast, eerie expanse of dead trees and ruined buildings, shadows stretching like long fingers across the ground. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant calls of scavenger birds circling overhead. As Caleb moved deeper into the ruins, the tension in his chest tightened. He spotted signs: broken branches, disturbed soil, footprints not quite human. The prowlers had passed here recently. Suddenly, a rustle echoed from a nearby alley. Caleb froze, heart pounding. A figure lunged from the shadows, and instinctively Caleb fired his crossbow. The bolt struck true, but the creature barely slowed. It hissed, revealing rows of jagged teeth, eyes blazing with a cold intelligence. Caleb barely dodged its swipe and sprinted away, his breath ragged. He radioed back: "Prowler sighted. They're hunting in packs. Be ready." Back at Ashfall, Lena listened carefully. The urgency in Caleb's voice confirmed her fears. The undead were no longer mindless, they had become predators. Inside the outpost, the survivors worked tirelessly to reinforce their defenses. Every scrap of metal and wood was repurposed to build new barricades and traps. The children were moved deeper inside shelters, away from the fragile outer walls. As night began to fall again, tension thickened. Everyone knew the prowlers would return, and next time, they would come stronger. Lena gathered her core team in the command center. "Tonight, we fight for Ashfall," she said firmly. "We hold this line, no matter what. Because if we lose here, dead America will be one step closer to swallowing what's left of humanity." The survivors prepared for another night of chaos, setting traps, loading weapons, and stealing their nerves. Then, as darkness fully descended, distant war cries rose once more across the wasteland. The prowlers and their undead army were coming back, and Ashfall Outpost was ready to meet them. Nightfall wrapped Ashfall Outpost in a cloak of shadows, the kind that swallowed sound and blurred the edges of reality. Inside the battered walls, every heartbeat echoed like a drum of war. The survivors moved like ghosts, barely daring to breathe as they prepared for the inevitable assault. Commander Lena Ortiz paced the command center, her mind racing through every possible scenario. The dead weren't just attacking, they were laying siege. From the jagged ruins beyond the walls, shapes moved in the darkness, slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly numerous. The prowlers, the evolved hunters, led the pack, stalking like wolves circling their prey. Their eyes glowed faintly, unnatural beacons in the blackness. Behind them, the horde swelled, a wave of decay and hunger that threatened to engulf Ashfall completely. "Brace yourselves," Lena said quietly, gripping her rifle. "This is going to be a long night." The first impact came as a thunderous roar, walls shaking, metal groaning under the pounding of countless hands and claws. The undead battered the barricades relentlessly, testing every weakness. Marcus and his team fought back with fierce determination. Bullets tore through the night, illuminating the battleground in harsh flashes. The traps set earlier sprung with deadly precision, flaming arrows, collapsing beams, and spiked pits slowed the advancing horde. But for every undead that fell, two more surged forward. Amid the chaos, Caleb moved silently along the outer perimeter, his crossbow picking off prowlers trying to slip past the defenses. His breath formed clouds in the cold night air as he fired and reloaded with practiced efficiency. Every shot was a gamble, but he was buying precious time for the outpost. Inside, the survivors huddled in tight groups, some tending to the wounded, others clutching makeshift weapons, their faces pale but resolute. Sarah comforted Jamie, whispering promises that they would survive this night together. Suddenly, a deafening crack split the air. One of the main gates buckled under the relentless assault. The undead surged inside, spilling into the outpost like a flood breaking through a dam. Lena shouted orders, rallying her fighters. "Fall back. Hold the inner courtyard. Don't let them spread." The battle became brutal and personal. Hand-to-hand combat erupted amid the ruins, knives flashed, fists collided with rotting flesh, and the sickening sounds of struggle filled the air. The dead moved with horrifying strength, fueled by something beyond mere instinct. Caleb found himself cornered near the supply tents, face to face with a prowler. The creature snarled, lunging at him with terrifying speed. Caleb dodged and stabbed with his knife, but the prowler was relentless. Just as it was about to strike a fatal blow, Marcus appeared, blasting the creature with his rifle. Caleb gasped, shaken but alive. Lena fought alongside her team, every muscle screaming in protest. She caught sight of a shadowy figure among the undead, a prowler moving with unnatural intelligence, signaling others. It was as if the dead were being commanded. "We're not just fighting zombies," Lena realized, breathless. "We're fighting an army." The outpost's communications crackled with frantic voices. "Ashfall, this is Outpost Echo. We see the horde moving toward you from the south. Estimated arrival, less than an hour." Lena's jaw tightened. They were surrounded on multiple fronts. The war cries outside weren't just noise, they were a call to annihilation. Inside the courtyard, the survivors formed a desperate defensive line. Every inch of ground was contested, every breath a battle won. The night dragged on in a relentless tide of violence and fear. Hours passed like minutes. Slowly, the undead began to retreat, pulling back into the shadows from which they came. The prowlers disappeared first, vanishing like specters. The horde's war cries faded into distant echoes. Ashfall Outpost stood, battered but unbroken. As dawn broke, Lena looked over her team, faces streaked with dirt and sweat, eyes burning with exhaustion and determination. The cost had been high, but they had survived. "This war isn't over," Lena said, voice steady but fierce. "They will come back. And next time, we have to be ready." Around her, the survivors nodded silently. In dead America, the battle for survival never ended. But as long as Ashfall stood, humanity still had a chance. The first light of dawn barely warmed Ashfall Outpost as the survivors tended to their wounds and counted their losses. The air was thick with exhaustion and quiet mourning, but beneath the surface, a new challenge was rising. The night's battle had revealed an unsettling truth: the undead prowlers were not acting alone. They were hunting with purpose, almost as if directed by something, or someone. Commander Lena Ortiz gathered her team in the command center, a makeshift room filled with maps, radios, and hastily scribbled notes. Her face was drawn but determined, the fire in her eyes refusing to fade. "We're dealing with more than just a mindless horde," she said. Those prowlers showed signs of coordination and strategy. Someone, or something, is controlling them. Marcus, still bruised from the fight, leaned forward. "We've intercepted some radio chatter from another survivor group. They claim to have found a settlement not far from here, people who have managed to organize a defense strong enough to keep the undead at bay." Sarah, ever the optimist despite the grim world, asked, "Could they help us?" "We need every ally we can get." Lena nodded slowly. "We don't have much choice. If this other group has figured out a way to hold back the dead, we need to know how. But we have to be cautious, trust is a rare commodity these days." That afternoon, a small team assembled for the journey. Caleb volunteered, his tracking skills invaluable for navigating the treacherous wasteland. Marcus, Lena, and Sarah joined him, each carrying the weight of their shared mission. The journey was perilous. The ruins of dead America stretched endlessly, a patchwork of shattered highways, abandoned vehicles, and skeletal remains of once bustling towns. Every shadow held a threat, every sound could be the herald of death. As they moved deeper into the wasteland, the tension among the group grew. Caleb's eyes scanned constantly, searching for signs of danger. Sarah kept a hand on her weapon, ready for anything. Marcus and Lena exchanged quiet strategies, weighing their options for what lay ahead. Suddenly, a distant explosion rocked the horizon, followed by a series of low, guttural war cries. The group froze. Caleb pointed toward a ridge where plumes of smoke curled into the sky. "That's not far from the settlement," he said. "Looks like trouble." Without hesitation, Lena made the decision. "We can't ignore that. Whatever's happening over there might affect us all." They quickened their pace, descending into a valley where the ground was churned and broken. Scattered remnants of a battle lay strewn about, twisted metal, broken weapons, and signs of struggle. As they approached the outskirts of the settlement, a figure stepped out from behind a crumbling wall. A man, armed and wary, with eyes sharp and calculating. "I'm Jonah," he said cautiously. "You're not the first to come looking for help. But if you want to survive, you'll need to prove you're not part of the problem." Lena stepped forward, showing her hands open in peace. "We're here because the undead are evolving. They're organized and dangerous. We need allies, not enemies." Jonah studied them, then nodded slowly. "You're right. We've been holding this place against constant attacks. But the prowlers have been getting smarter, coordinating strikes like a military unit. We call it the Hive, and it's growing." Marcus frowned. "A hive? What do you mean?" Jonah explained, "The prowlers seem to follow signals, some kind of command. It's almost like the undead are being controlled by a central force. We've been trying to find the source, but it's deep in the ruins." Sarah's voice softened. "So, this is worse than we thought. It's not just survival, it's a war for control." Jonah nodded grimly. "And the Hive is winning." Lena glanced at her team. "Then we need to combine our strength. Share knowledge, weapons, and manpower. If we face this together, maybe we stand a chance." The tension between the groups was palpable. Years of isolation had bred suspicion and fear. But survival demanded cooperation. That night, under a sky smeared with stars and smoke, the survivors of Ashfall and Jonah's settlement forged a fragile alliance. Around a small fire, plans were made and stories shared, tales of battles won and friends lost. Yet, as the flames flickered, a chilling howl echoed from the distance, a reminder that in dead America, peace was only a fleeting shadow. Lena's eyes narrowed. The war cries in the wasteland had only just begun. The dawn rose weakly over the battered settlement, painting the sky in pale hues of orange and gray. The fragile alliance between Ashfall Outpost and Jonah's survivors had settled into a tense routine. Both groups shared supplies, strategies, and a wary trust born from the shared nightmare of living surrounded by the undead. Commander Lena Ortiz stood on the makeshift walls, eyes scanning the horizon. The threat of the hive loomed larger with every passing day. The undead prowlers no longer moved aimlessly. They struck with precision, coordinated assaults that tested every defense the survivors could muster. Jonah approached, his face grim. "We've confirmed what we feared. The hive center is in the ruins of New Hope City, just a day's trek from here." Lena's gaze sharpened. "If we destroy their command point, maybe we can cripple their control. But it's heavily guarded." Marcus, cleaning his rifle nearby, added, "We're talking about walking into the lion's den." Sarah's eyes flickered with determination. "If we don't act, the hive will only grow stronger. We can't wait for them to come for us." That afternoon, the combined teams prepared for the most dangerous mission yet, an assault on the hive's heart. Supplies were packed, weapons checked, and plans meticulously mapped. Caleb studied the terrain, plotting a route that balanced speed with stealth. As they set out, the wasteland swallowed them once more, endless stretches of rubble, skeletal trees, and silence broken only by distant groans. The air was thick with anticipation and dread. Hours into their journey, the group paused near a shattered highway overpass. Caleb scanned the area carefully, sensing something off. His sharp eyes caught movement in the shadows, a small group of prowlers lurking, watching. "We've been spotted," he whispered urgently. Without hesitation, the team moved into position. Marcus raised his rifle, taking the first shot. The firefight erupted violently, echoing across the empty expanse. Bullets tore through the undead ranks, but the prowlers fought fiercely, using the ruins for cover and striking with unexpected cunning. Lena's voice cut through the chaos. "Push forward. Don't let them flank us." The group pressed on, adrenaline fueling their steps. The hive was close. As they approached the outskirts of New Hope City, a chilling sight awaited them. The streets were littered with the dead, but not mindless corpses. These zombies moved in formations, guarding twisted nests of metal and wires. Strange devices emitted faint pulses, humming with an eerie energy. Jonah frowned, stepping carefully. This is their control network. Whatever's sending commands to the hive is here. Caleb studied one device, tracing cables that disappeared into the underground tunnels below the city. "The source is beneath us." Lena's jaw tightened. "Then that's where we go. We destroy the core, and we cut off their command." The survivors prepared to descend into the dark tunnels, a maze of concrete and steel that had long since surrendered to decay. The air grew colder, heavier, filled with the stench of rot and rust. Inside the labyrinth, every sound was amplified. Footsteps echoed eerily, shadows danced against cracked walls. The team moved with caution, weapons ready. Suddenly, a low growl reverberated through the tunnel. From the darkness emerged not just prowlers, but grotesque mutations, zombies twisted by the hive's dark influence, faster and stronger than anything they had seen. The battle became desperate. The survivors fought with every ounce of strength, the narrow tunnels amplifying the terror in intensity. Lena took down one creature after another, her rifle cracking in the confined space. Marcus was at her side, throwing a makeshift grenade that exploded in a fiery burst, buying them precious seconds. Caleb's crossbow bolts found their marks with deadly precision. Sarah tended wounds and kept spirits steady. Finally, they reached a cavernous chamber where the control core pulsed, a monstrous device of wires, screens, and blinking lights. Around it, the hive's leaders, prowlers with unnatural intelligence, watched, snarling in defiance. Lena raised her rifle. "This ends now." As the team launched their assault on the core, alarms blared and the hive's forces surged. The survivors fought with everything they had, knowing this moment could decide the fate of dead America. Explosions rocked the chamber. The control core sparked and smoked under the barrage. With a final, desperate charge, Caleb plunged a knife into the core's heart. The device shuddered, then died. Instantly, a wave of silence swept through the tunnels. The coordinated attacks faltered. The undead outside hesitated, confused without their command. Lena breathed hard, looking at her team with a mix of relief and exhaustion. We did it, but this war is far from over. The destruction of the Hive's control core sent a shockwave through the undead ranks, momentarily scattering their coordinated attacks. The Wasteland seemed to hold its breath as the survivors made their way back toward the settlement, weary but victorious. Back at Jonah's compound, the mood was cautiously hopeful. Survivors moved with purpose, repairing barricades, treating the injured, and sharing whispered hopes that the nightmare might finally be losing its grip. Commander Lena Ortiz found a rare moment to rest, but even in the quiet, her mind churned. The Hive's sudden collapse raised more questions than answers. Who had built such a network? How had they managed to command the undead with such precision? As she walked through the compound, Jonah caught up with her, his expression grave. "We have another problem," he said quietly. "Not all of our people are as committed to this fight as you might think." Lena raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jonah motioned toward a group of survivors gathered near a makeshift tent. "There's been talk, rumors of someone working against us. Feeding information to the undead. Sabotaging our efforts." Lena's heart sank. "A traitor? Here? After everything we've been through?" Jonah nodded slowly. "We can't ignore it. Trust is fragile, and fear makes people desperate. We have to find out who's behind this before it's too late." That night, Lena convened a meeting with her closest team members. Marcus and Caleb exchanged uneasy glances, knowing the consequences if a traitor was uncovered. Sarah, ever compassionate, said, "We can't let paranoia tear us apart. But we have to be vigilant." Lena agreed. "We'll keep this quiet for now. Watch and wait. But anyone caught betraying us will be dealt with." In the days that followed, subtle signs of sabotage appeared, supplies missing, weapons tampered with, patrol routes changed without orders. Suspicion grew like a dark cloud over the settlement. One evening, as Lena reviewed their maps, Marcus burst in, breathless. "I think I found something." He handed her a torn piece of fabric, part of a jacket with a unique insignia worn by a faction from a rival survivor group they had encountered weeks ago. "They've been here," Marcus said grimly. "Spying on us. Possibly coordinating with the Hive." Lena's jaw clenched. "Then this goes deeper than we thought. Our fight isn't just with the undead, it's with the living who've given up on humanity." Meanwhile, Caleb and Sarah volunteered to scout the perimeter, hoping to catch the saboteur in the act. Their patrol took them through shattered streets and empty houses, each corner hiding potential threats. As they neared an old warehouse, a flicker of movement caught Caleb's eye. They approached silently, weapons raised. Inside, they found a figure hunched over a radio transmitter, sending coded messages into the night. The person turned abruptly, a young woman with haunted eyes and trembling hands. I didn't want this," she stammered. "They promised safety, but they're using us." Sarah lowered her weapon slightly. "Who are you working with?" The woman's voice broke. "The Black Vultures. They're a ruthless group controlling parts of dead America. They want the Hive to keep the survivors weak and divided." Caleb's grip tightened on his crossbow. "Then we have to stop them, before their plans destroy everything." The next morning, Lena confronted the woman, who confirmed the Black Vulture's infiltration. The settlement's leaders realized they faced a two-front war, against the undead and against those who had lost all hope for humanity. Lena addressed the survivors. "This isn't just a fight for survival anymore. It's a fight for the future of what's left of our world. We can't let fear or betrayal destroy us. Together, we stand stronger." As preparations began to defend against the Black Vulture's impending attack, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that the Wasteland's greatest battles were still ahead. Outside the compound, the wind howled, carrying distant war cries, reminders that in dead America, the line between friend and foe was perilously thin. Ready for part 7 when you are. This story is heating up. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the battered settlement as tension thickened the air. The news of the Black Vulture's infiltration sent ripples of fear and urgency through the survivors. No one knew exactly when the ruthless faction would strike, but everyone felt the looming storm. Lena stood atop the observation post, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Her team worked frantically, fortifying barricades, setting traps, and organizing patrols. Jonah gathered the leaders in a quick strategy meeting. We can't afford to be caught off guard. They want to weaken us before the undead finish what we started. Marcus rubbed his chin thoughtfully. We need to be smarter. Hit them before they hit us. Sarah nodded, her eyes sharp with resolve. We can set a trap. Use their aggression against them. The survivors prepared for a confrontation that would test every ounce of their strength and will. Night fell, and with it came silence that pressed heavily against the settlement. Then, without warning, the quiet shattered. Flames erupted on the outskirts, Black Vulture's raiders launching a sudden attack, throwing Molotov cocktails and firing their weapons. The war cries of the vultures mixed with the groans of the undead drawn by the chaos. Lena grabbed her rifle and shouted orders. Hold your positions. Don't let them break the line. The battle ignited in a furious blaze of sound and fury. Survivors fought side by side, using everything from rifles and knives to improvised weapons. Caleb moved with deadly precision, picking off attackers before they could close in. Marcus charged through the flames, smashing any enemy that came too close. Sarah and a few medics ran among the wounded, patching up injuries and keeping morale alive. Jonah spotted a group of raiders attempting to flank the settlement from the north. Lena, the north wall. Lena didn't hesitate. Rallying a squad, she sprinted toward the breach, fighting through smoke and fire. The Black Vultures fought with brutal efficiency, their desperation clear. As the battle raged, something unexpected happened. The undead, drawn by the commotion, began to flood the battlefield. Instead of attacking the survivors alone, the Black Vultures suddenly found themselves caught between two deadly enemies. Panic flickered in the raiders' eyes as they scrambled to defend themselves from the ravenous horde. Lena saw her chance. Push them back. Drive them into the undead. With renewed vigor, the survivors launched a counterattack. The Black Vultures, caught in the crossfire of human fury and undead hunger, began to falter. In the thick of the chaos, Caleb noticed a figure moving with unnatural speed, one of the mutated hive creatures, leading the undead swarm. Its glowing eyes locked on him. Without thinking, Caleb fired, but the creature dodged and charged. They clashed fiercely, Caleb's crossbow bolts piercing flesh, but the monster's strength overwhelmed him. Just as the creature lunged, Marcus intervened with a brutal strike, saving Caleb at the last moment. The battle slowly turned in the survivors' favor. The Black Vultures retreated, their forces broken and scattered. As the fires died down, Lena gathered her team. We've won this fight, but the war isn't over. The vultures will come back, and the hive will keep growing. Jonah sighed, wiping soot from his face. We need allies, more supplies, and better intelligence. Otherwise, we're just delaying the inevitable. Sarah looked out at the wasteland, where the shadows of the fallen mixed with the rising smoke. Then we fight harder. We don't give up. The survivors tended to their wounded and mourned their losses, but beneath it all burned a fierce determination. In the distance, beyond the ruins, the hive stirred. The war cries echoed, promising that the wasteland's fiercest battles were far from over. When you want part 8, just say the word. The story's momentum is building strong. The aftermath of the Black Vulture's failed attack left the settlement battered but unbroken. Flames still smoldered among the ruins, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke, sweat, and loss. Yet amidst the wreckage, something unexpected stirred, a fragile hope. Lena stood amid the survivors, her gaze steely. The battles had shown one undeniable truth: alone, they would never reclaim dead America. It was time to seek allies, even if those alliances came with risks. Jonah brought news from a scout who had ventured beyond the wasteland's edge. There's a group to the east, the Iron Wolves. Fierce fighters, and they've held their ground against the hive longer than anyone else. Sarah frowned. They're known to be ruthless and distrustful. What makes you think they'll help us? Jonah's expression was grim. Because they hate the black vultures as much as we do. And they know the hive is the real enemy. Reluctantly, Lena agreed to send a delegation to negotiate. Trust was a rare commodity now, but the fight demanded it. Caleb and Marcus volunteered to lead the mission. Armed and cautious, they set out at dawn, slipping through the wasteland's shattered roads and silent ruins. Their journey was tense. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat, whether undead or hostile survivors. At night, the distant howls of the hive's creatures haunted their campfires. When the Iron Wolves' territory came into view, they found a heavily fortified settlement carved into the remnants of an industrial complex. Wolves adorned their armor with scavenged metal and wolf pelts, their eyes sharp and unyielding. The delegation was met with suspicion, but Caleb and Marcus spoke earnestly of the common threat. After hours of negotiation, the wolves agreed to a tenuous alliance, driven more by survival than trust. Back at their own settlement, preparations began for what might be the largest battle yet. The Iron Wolves brought weapons, strategies, and hardened warriors ready to fight. But even as alliances formed, Lena couldn't shake a gnawing worry. Reports came in of increased hive activity near their borders, more aggressive and coordinated than ever before. One evening, she stood with Sarah and Jonah, staring at a flickering map projected by an old tablet. "The hive is evolving," Sarah said quietly. "Their attacks are smarter, more strategic." Jonah nodded. "And the black vultures won't stop until we're all crushed." Lena clenched her fists. "Then we fight smarter. We use every advantage. This wasteland won't silence us, not yet." That night, as the survivors prepared for the battles ahead, whispers spread of a shadowy figure leading the hive, a monstrous presence said to be more cunning than any before. The war cries of dead America echoed into the darkness, carrying a warning: the fiercest fights were still to come, and only those united by trust and steel would survive. "Just let me know when you want part 9, we're closing in on the climax." The wasteland was restless. A cold wind swept through the settlement, carrying whispers of dread and warning. The fragile alliance with the Iron Wolves had bolstered defenses, but everyone knew something far worse was coming. Lena paced the command tent, her eyes scanning every report, every map, searching for patterns. The hive's aggression was no longer random, it was methodical, precise, almost intelligent. Jonah entered, his face grim. "We've had sightings, something big. A creature unlike anything we've faced. Survivors describe it as a shadow with glowing eyes, moving faster than the undead." Sarah, her voice steady but tense, added, "They call it the beast. It's leading the hive's attacks, hunting survivors." The room fell silent. The beast wasn't just a monster, it was a symbol of the hive's evolving menace, a force that could shatter any hope. That night, Lena led a reconnaissance mission to gather intelligence on the beast. The team moved through the darkness, every step heavy with anticipation. Suddenly, the ground trembled, a low growl echoed through the ruins. Out of the shadows, the beast emerged, a towering figure, its limbs twisted, muscles rippling beneath decaying flesh, eyes burning with unnatural fire. It let out a deafening roar that chilled the blood. The survivors opened fire, but the beast was relentless, shrugging off bullets and charging with terrifying speed. Caleb fired a well-aimed shot, but the creature barely flinched. Marcus lunged with a makeshift spear, striking its side, but it tore through his defense with brutal strength. Lena shouted orders, rallying her team to focus their attacks on the creature's glowing eyes, its only vulnerable spot. Amid the chaos, Sarah managed to plant an explosive device, detonating it near the beast's feet. The blast staggered the monster, and the survivors pressed their advantage. Finally, the beast collapsed with a ground-shaking crash, its roar fading into a low growl before silence. The team returned to the settlement, battered but alive. Their victory was bittersweet, they had faced the hive's deadliest weapon but knew more horrors awaited. Lena addressed the survivors, her voice unwavering. "The beast showed us that the hive adapts, that this war will test us beyond anything we imagined. But we have something they don't, our unity, our will to survive." Jonah added, "Tomorrow, we strike back. Together with the Iron Wolves, we end this nightmare. As dawn broke over the wasteland, war cries echoed louder than ever, signaling that the final, fierce battles for dead America were about to begin. Let me know when you want Part 10, the epic conclusion. The morning sun broke over the scarred horizon, casting a pale light on a world battered but unbroken. The survivors stood ready: Lena, Jonah, Sarah, Caleb, Marcus, and their newfound allies from the Iron Wolves. Their eyes were fierce, their hearts steeled for the battle that would decide the fate of dead America. The settlement buzzed with a mix of fear and determination. This was no ordinary fight, it was the culmination of every sacrifice, every loss, every desperate hope. Lena moved through the ranks, her voice calm but powerful. This is our home. Our future. We fight not just to survive, but to reclaim what was lost. Jonah's hand rested on his weapon. The Hive's numbers are vast, but they lack what we have: strategy, courage, and unity. The survivors knew the odds were grim. The Hive would come with everything it had, led by remnants of the beast and swarms of undead. But surrender was not an option. As the first growls echoed from the darkened woods, the defenders took their positions. The ground shook beneath the stampede of undead, and war cries pierced the air, human and Hive locked in brutal combat. Flames erupted, bullets screamed, and steel clashed. Caleb fought with relentless precision, picking off the advancing horde. Marcus and the Iron Wolves carved through enemies with savage efficiency. Sarah tended to the wounded, her hands steady despite the chaos. Lena confronted a monstrous Hive lieutenant, an abomination of twisted flesh and feral rage. Their battle was fierce, every strike a fight for survival. With a final surge, Lena drove her blade through the creature's heart, watching it collapse into ash. But the Hive's assault never ceased. Just as hope seemed to wane, reinforcements arrived, the Black Vultures, battered but alive, joining the fight. Their leader, bloodied but defiant, shouted, "We're done fighting each other. It's time to end this." The unexpected alliance bolstered the defenders' strength. Together, human survivors pushed back the Hive's relentless tide. The battle raged for hours, turning the wasteland into a fiery, desperate battlefield. At last, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the last of the undead fell, their war cries fading into silence. Exhausted but victorious, the survivors gathered, bloodied and bruised but unbroken. Jonah spoke, voice hoarse but hopeful. "We've won today, but the war isn't over. Dead America will always be a wasteland, dangerous, unforgiving. But we've shown that as long as we stand together, we can survive." Lena looked out at the horizon, the first stars shimmering above. "The wasteland has tested us, broken us, but it hasn't destroyed us. We'll rebuild. We'll fight for every inch of this land until the war cries turn to songs of peace." In the distance, the quiet hum of the wasteland resumed, a world scarred but alive, shaped by those brave enough to fight. The fierce battles had raged and ended, for now. But the war for dead America, and for humanity's future, was far from over. That completes your 10-part story outline. Would you like me to help with anything else, maybe a shorter summary, photo prompts, or something else for your YouTube,